Welcome to GC Connect. Maybe in the previous classes, we are discussing about the different types of test which we are going to conduct on the bricks, and we have discussed the test which we are going to conduct on the concrete, and the test on the aggregates, the test on the cement. So maybe in the examination they will ask the different test on the aggregate, cement, concrete and the bricks for about 10 marks. What you can do is that if they ask it, you list all the tests and explain what kind of test it is and how we are going to conduct it and what strength you are going to get in that all information. So today we'll move on to the third module. So in the third module, in the syllabus they have mentioned it, how to prepare the bills uh, in the building construction, and how to prepare the the quantity estimated for the building process. So of course the how to make the tenders and all those things, they are not mentioned in the syllabus, but this is minimum essential thing is required if you want to make the bills. So before proceeding to the how to prepare the bill for the estimation of all the quantities, we will see how the tendering process will work and how to make the tenders, how to put the tenders, and how the tenders is approved, and once it is approved, how the contractor is going to take all those tenders, and what are the duties of the contractor, and what is the eligibility of the contractor. Maybe this is a very good information which you can use it for your in further studies, as well as if you are going to become a contractor. This is very useful information. So before making the bills, or before preparing the bills, the tendering process is very important. So first, what is tender? It is an invitation from the owner to the contractor to execute some work at specified cost in specified time. It is published in the form of tender notice in newspapers, notice boards, gazettes, etc., according to the cost of works. So, very important, it is an invitation from the owner to the contractor. It's an invitation to execute some work in with a specified cost with a specified time, and the tender will always, we are going to publish it in newspapers, notice boards, gazettes, etc., according to the cost of work, whether it is a national tender or international tender, that is left to the decision makers. So then the classification of tenders. Normally different types of tenders are available. The first one is the open tender. The open tender is an oral talk or the written document between the engineer and the contractor for certain small jobs to be performed. Sometimes it is advertised. It is an oral document or the written document between the engineer and the contractor. Normally the engineer or the consultant, normally we can call him as the engineer or the consultant, and the contractor for certain small jobs to be performed. Sometimes it is advertised. Of course, it may not be true that open tender cannot be advertised. It can be advertised or it may not be advertised. So seal tender. So seal tender is invited for important or huge products. So wide publicity is given. Always written documents are made. So sealed tenders, like normally if you see the approximate cost, if it is more than 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, or it is in terms of crores, normally the sealed tenders are invited, and normally these sealed tenders are all on the government organizations. Of course, in the private organizations, if they want, they can deviate any of the rules, but in the most of the government organizations, if they want to execute any of the work, normally they have to put it under the sealed tender only. So then limited tender. The limited tender is only a selected number of contractors or invited to quote their rates. So means, for example, um, if it's not that much importance to be given for the work, so in that cases the limited tender will be invited, and it is used for one or two members only. Of course, for limited tenders, the members, it will be maximum 3. So then single tender, it is invitation is given only to only one firm or one person to render the service by quoting their rates. It is given to only one person, without sometimes directly they will award it. They will not display any of the things in the newspapers directly. They will put it in one that is single tender. They will write it on the top of that single tender, and they will write it mm, that it is a single, it is awarded to this person in the newspaper directly itself. If the quoted rates are high, it will be negotiated to the agreement of the contract. See, even if it is more, it can be negotiated, and directly they will the put amount also in the newspapers. That you can call it as a single tendering process. So rate contract, it is rate contract usually adopted for supply of materials, machine, tools, and the plant, etc. Of course, items of the stores. It specifies the supply at a fixed rate during the period of contract. The quantities are not mentioned in the type of contract, and the contractor is bound to accept any order which would be placed before him. So this rate contract is usually adopted for supply of materials, machines. For example, per unit of the steel, what will be the rate, and it has to be fixed for the it has to be mentioned in that contract. Of course, it is a fixed rate of the materials. Sometimes during the contract process, this may not be mentioned. Tender form. So tender form is printed standard form of contract given for standard conditions of the contract. So general rules and the directions of the guidance of the contract. It will say, it will give some of the general rules and the direction of the guidance also. So there are some memorandums are also given in this tender forms. Memorandum means we can call it as understanding of the understanding of between the contractor and the engineer, whom you are making the tenders, or the organizations with the contractors. So some of the memorandums will includes what about the general description of the work, so then estimated cost, so then earnest money deposits, then security deposits, uh, time limits in months, column for signature of the contract before submission of the tender, signature of the witness to the contractor's signature, signature of the officer whom it is accepted. So these are all the details should be there in the tender form. First one is what is the description of the work, estimated cost, So earnest money, that we'll discuss further. Security deposit, time limit of the months when you are going to complete that work, column for the signature of the contract before submission, means signature of the different authorities and the witnesses also. That space should be provided in the tender form. And the final approval authority or the competent authority, that should be given in the tender form. So the price of the tender form is given in the form also. So now, which are the tender documents should be prepared and has to be submitted for the competent authority? The notice inviting tenders is a standard approved form of a department. It is the notice inviting the tenders is a standard approved form of a department. Schedule of quantities of work to be done and materials, tools, and the plants to be supplied in the department, if any. The tender documents, schedule of the quantity of works to be done. Tools is what kind of tools are required for this, that has to be specified. So what kind of plants that has to be uh, supplied, that has to be reported in the tender documents. So tender document should consist of complete specification of the works also. So the tender document should to be approved one set the drawings whenever it is required. Even along with the tender documents, even you can supply some of the drawings also. All the documents are to be signed by the contractor page by page. Forwarding letterhead of the contractor with blank or put in a closed cover. See, normally this is a very important mm, uh, statement. Whenever your the tender document is there, so blank letterhead of the contractor, and it should be signed. Do not write anything. Means it is like one security agreement, whichever they can put it on that document, and it has to be signed by the contractor in that tender documents. Of course they can write anything, but that whatever it is there, that has to be declared before making the tendering process. Sometimes if the contractor is not working properly, they can write it on that you are abide by the rules and regulations of the tendering process, then they can supply it. The cover is closed and dropped on the tender box within the time limit for the tender. Normally the cover is closed and dropped on the tender box within the time limit for the tender. The name of the work and the name of the contractor are mentioned on the cover, whatever the cloth cover, or you can take it your company cover. On that you have to write it and you have to submit it. So then, information to be given in a tender notice. So what are all the information has to be given for a tender notice? So first one is name of the department inviting tender, that has to be given. Name of the work and the location. Designation of the officer inviting tender. Last date and the time of receipt of a tender. Period of availability of a tender document, the time you have to specify there. Cost of the tender document, what will be the cost of the tender document. And this is when time of completion and the type of contract, how much time is required for completion of the tender, and the type of contract you have to give. So then earnest money deposit to be paid. Earnest means it is for tendering process. You have to give some money as a deposit during your tendering process, saying that we are not violating any of the rules and regulation of the tendering process. If I'm violating that rules and regulations, his earnest money deposit cannot be given back. If you are quoting very low, or if you are quoting mm, law means, if you are violating the rules and regulations of the tendering process, then you are quoting, you are not allowed to give that earnest money deposit. Or sometimes the blacklisted person, if he is giving um, the tendering process, he is not allowed to give the um, earnest money deposits. So then security deposit, one more it is there. Once the tender is accepted, then during the execution of work, if any problem is happened, or if any um, hmm, or if any failures happen during the execution of work, then that security deposit cannot be given. Or sometimes that if he is accepting the tender, or if he is given a contract to some contractor, if the contractor is unable to do the quality of work, so then the security deposit cannot be given. So two deposits are very important. The first one is earnest money deposit, and the second one is a security deposit. Date, time, and the place of opening the tender that has to be given in the tender notice. So means this tender notice, it has to be advertised in the newspapers, and that newspaper, what are all the information should be given. Designation of the officer opening the tender, that also given. So then information to be given in a tender document, that is a tender notice. This is a tender document. The notice inviting tender in a specified form like PWD 6. So in the specified form, in the for different organizations, different type of rules and regulations are there. If you are handling some of the tendering process of central PWD, CPWD, different is there. Then if you are the Jilla Panchayat, the different documents are there. Then it has to be specified in a standard form itself. Then layout of plan, location of the work should be executed, that has to be written. Division in which the location is situated, what division in which the location is situated. Schedule of quantities of work, that has to be mentioned. Then nearest road, railway link. For example, sometimes what will happen is that if you are unable to um, bring the materials to that site, it is very difficult. So then it is better to give the details of the nearest road link or the railway link, so that the materials can be supplied without disturbance or in the effective manner. Set of drawings including the working drawings, that has to be supplied. Means different types of drawings that has to be supplied. Availability of the materials in the vicinity, you have to say that one is the transportation and one more is the availability of the materials. Is there any possibility of the availability of materials in and around the site, whether it is there or not, that has to be um, given. Suppose if your site is 200 kilometers or 300 kilometers from the where the material is available, then normally the tender process will not happen to that person who is dealing with that contract. So it is better to give the tenders for whom it is very nearest to that site, and the materials are available to that site. Then detailed specifications or the reference to standard specifications for each of the item of the work, that has to be given. For example, aggregate. For aggregate, what will be the specifications? For cement, what will be the specifications? And for mm, if you say for bricks, what will be the specifications according to whether it is a IS classification, what will be the strength of that, whether it's what kind of mix you are doing, that is 1 is to 3 is to 6 or 1 is to 2 is to 4, that all information should be given in that tender document. Complete architecture and structural drawings also should be provided in the tender document. Schedule of tools and plants and other facilities to be made availability by the owner, indicating the conditions, hire charges and place of delivery. The scheduled tools, plant and other facilities to be made available by the owner, and their conditions means, for example, if you have one machine is there, that is concrete mixing is there, what condition it is there, how many years it is serving, what company it is, means if that conditions has to be furnished. Because suppose if they award the tender and it has to be executed to at uh, in within a 1 month, suppose if the instrument is not working, normally again procuring that instrument it will take its own time. So at that condition all the things has to be mentioned in that um, mm, tendering document. Rate of supply of power and the point of supply, means power supply thing that has to be mentioned properly. The location of the water supply point, wherever it is there, that has to be mentioned, because most of the time when you are executing some of the works in their drawings, wherever the location of the water supply, that has to be unit, because most of the time if you break it water supply line, normally if it is a 24 by 7 water supply line, then normally what will happen is that it is going to cut, then nobody will store it the water for, if it is going to cut, then normally the human life will not it will be disturbed. So when it is 24 by water supply line, because normally people will not store the water if it is a 24 by 7 water supply unit. So in that cases it's very much essential to display the details about the water supply lines as well as the electric connections if it is underground or power supply line is there. If you break it that much period, the persons who are there are the residential persons are going to lose the water at that period time, because the repairing it will take its own time, at least till then water is required. Time for completion and the progress to be made at intervals of time, that has to be mentioned. Conditions regarding employment of technical personals. So normally what will happen is, even if they have awarded the tender, skilled person is required to execute that works. So then you have to mention, your company has to give the details of the employers also who are there in your company, because if unskilled persons are there, normally the quality of work will not be executed, as well as the proper quantity they will not mix. Normally they won't give that much preference to the quality of work. So then if the quality of the work has to be executed, then skilled persons should be required and its qualification has to be uh, given in detail. So weather conditions in the area has to be mentioned, because what will be weather conditions during the 12 months. So when you have to execute it, when you have to plan it, that has to be made in that tendering document process. So that's the amount of earnest money deposit, that is EMD, and the form which is to be paid, that has to be mentioned in the tendering documents, and how much percentage of EMD should be given in that tender document. So once the tender is allotted, so then the allotted to, then the contractor or the person for whom it is allotted, he has to make one quotation. So the quotation consists of the rates of uh, materials of different firms that has to be collected with the different quotations. Then directly they will for that quotation, it's nothing but for each of the materials what will be the cost of that unit that they will give it in that quotation. For small jobs, the owner or the engineer gives an offer to a contract for quoting the rates of works and supply required. So, of course, no EMD is required for the quotation. Only for the tendering process, the EMD is required. So earnest money deposit. Previously, we were discussing about the earnest money deposit. So it is the amount of money to be deposited along with the tender document to the department. So it has to be deposited during the tendering process. And normally, if the tendering is not allotted to you, then this money they will give it back. If the tendering is allotted, then the earnest money deposit, um, they will um, keep it with their government organizations only, or the person who is awarding the tender. This money is guarantee against the refusal of any contractor to take up the work after acceptance of his tender. In case of refusal, this amount is cancelled. So, EMD of contractors whose tenders are not accepted will be refunded. Of course, if the tender is not accepted, then it will be refunded. See, sometimes they will not refund the amount EMD. Suppose if you are putting it in a bad manner or if it is not in a proper order, so they will say that you have to put the tender in a proper manner itself. So 1 to 2% of the estimated cost of the work is the earnest money deposit. So 1 to 2% of the work they will go for the earnest money deposit. Then security deposit. Security deposit is the amount the contractor has to deposit with the owner before awarding the work after his tender is accepted. So now once the tender is accepted, it has to be given to one contractor. Then if you want to continue that work, then you have to give some security deposit. What is this security deposit is? The security deposit is nothing but normally in the estimated copy, mm, they will give some of the quality of the work and the quantity also. Suppose if you are violating the quality as well as the quantity, whatever is there in the estimated copy, then the security deposit will not be given. Or if you are unable to complete the work within the stipulated time, then the security deposit will not be work. Suppose if um, the if you are unable to complete the work, it will not be given. Suppose if you are 50% if you are done, 50% if you are not doing it, then the security deposit will not be given. With that security deposit, they will proceed further. So normally this will be 5 to 10% of the estimated cost of the project and is inclusive of EMD already deposited by the contractor along with the tender. This will be refunded to the after completion of the project. No interest is paid on this security deposit. Of course, no interest will be paid on this security deposit. The contractor has to fulfill all the terms and conditions laid down in the contract and maintain the quality and speed satisfactorily. If he fails to do so, a part or a whole of the security deposit is cancelled. If there is any fault in the construction and the contractor refuses to demolish and reconstruct, then the department will carry out that work using that security deposit that I already told to you. Okay, so till security deposit we have covered today. Maybe we will go with what will be the qualification of the contracts in the next class. Some of the things maybe you already studied in the contracts subject, but still these are all information is required during the billing process. So what kind of tender it is, what is the open tender or closed tender, then you should know what is the open tender and what is the closed tender. So we'll go with these results in the next class.